So that's what I'm trying to tell people is that the offense for the Chicago Bears is going to be a work in progress. You know, it's interesting because I was in Cincinnati over the weekend. And remember a year ago at this time, people thought that Joe Burrow wasn't going to be able to come back from his knee injury. They thought Jamar Chase couldn't catch the football. And so a lot of people were panicking and a lot of people were overreacting. I want to implore Bears fans to not do that with this offense. It's going to take some time. There are going to be plays that look awful. There are going to be times where the defense dominates. And to be perfectly truthful with you, this goes back to something that Ill Will was talking about on Twitter the other day. It's like, hey, if the Bears have a top 10 defense, then they're practicing against one of the best defenses they're going to see all season. So I understand everybody. Listen, we've been through the Matt Nagy years. We've been through the Trestman years. We've been through it all. I understand it better than anybody. But let's just calm down and let this play out. And as a matter of fact, Sammy, let's play that intro.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
Trying to cut it back. Justin Fields making magic happen. There goes Fields. Touchdown.
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank. We are pleased to have you with us today, and especially those of you in the Chicagoland area, because as you know, AM 1530 WCKG is the Chicago home of the Sick Podcast. Every Friday, 2 p.m. Central, we come at you. And then following immediately, the No Name Pod, we have Olin Kreutz, Jason McKee right after us. 2 hours of quality Bears talk. And I'm bummed out I missed Olin Kreutz this week at the Bears camp. I don't know if he goes to Bears camp or whatever, but it has been an amazing time. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube, that's right. I am still here in Deer Park, Illinois. I don't know. I'm in an office park in a Hyatt hanging out. I have some wall art behind me, and we've been having a very good time in Chicago. Got the facility twice this week. Went to practice on Wednesday. It was exciting to see all the fans out there. Everybody was having a good time. The atmosphere at camp was really good. I really liked the addition of the music and everything like that. The fans were festive. Everybody was cool. Everybody was having a good time. Interesting, some of the things that I saw at Bears camp. Now, I was out there for the NFL Network. I will tell you, we had a lot of great conversations coming from Bears Park. We had an opportunity to speak to head coach Matt Eberflus. We talked to David Montgomery, which surprised me, knew who I was. And he was like, hey, good to meet you. He's like, I've been looking forward to this. And I'm like, what? David Montgomery? The great David Montgomery. And we had a good conversation with him. Obviously, he had a great day at the podium on Wednesday, talking about a lot of the things that he's been battling through during his NFL career. We'll talk a little bit more about David Montgomery and his fantasy expectations because we're going to be having James Coe, my former colleague at the NFL Network, and of course, one of my good friends. He's going to be joining us to break down some of the fantasy implications of the Bears offense, the one that I'm telling you not to panic about. But I will tell you, the defense was looking pretty good. And we got an opportunity to talk to Jalen Johnson. And Jalen is amazing. We got to get him on the show. You will love him. If you have not listened to him, if you've not heard him talk, he's very energetic, very insightful. Talking about this team, the way it's looking now with Matt Eberflus, and, talking to some people around the building, it just feels like there are more adults in the room, so to speak. It feels like a better run professional football organization. Now, I, of course, will listen to people complain about stuff, and they're, reporters who, and by the way, the Chicago media does a great job. We appreciate everything they do. Everybody who's out there each and every day, they do a great job. But sometimes, and there's a small number of people who can, I don't know. I'm always excited to be there. So when I hear complaints, I'm like, listen, A lot of the things that people are complaining about too are NFL policies, not team policies. So I just want to let you know that I bounce around. I was at the Bengals camp. I've been to the camps in California. I will tell you, the Bears do an absolutely great job. I thought that the PR staff, from Aaron Clark down, Ben Schmitz, all those guys, Allie, like amazing people, did an amazing job, made sure that I was taken care of. We had a great job on the NFL Network, got a lot of hits in. I know we're talking about Jalen Johnson and the accountability. I think that's a huge thing because we had Jalen Johnson with us, and Jalen's going to go on TV, and he's excited to do this. And we all know, like you should know this by now. Jalen loves to talk. Like he's not shy about talking. He was very concerned. He was very concerned that we were going to run too close to his 2:00 meeting. So he's like, we got to get out of here. Like, I'm not dealing with this. That felt like a change from the last couple of years. I think that there was a more lackadaisical attitude, perhaps. I don't know, just trying to get a sense of it. But I do love the way that the practices went, the organization went. And again, going back to the offense, and I'll talk about this a little bit more with James Coe. There are some things that need to be ironed out, and that's going to happen, and that happens to a lot of teams. And when you have a change, not only at the head coach, but you're changing offensive coordinators, your quarterback is getting first team reps for the first time in a training camp ever, which is ridiculous. This is weird. This is one thing that I found out traveling around, found this out when I was in Cincinnati. Apparently, when you draft a quarterback in the first round, a lot of teams will give them first team reps. That's crazy. I know. I'm as shocked as you. Like, it's insane to me. Like, what other team would draft a quarterback and not give him first team reps? Like, at least Trey Lance, I feel like, was working in with the ones last year. The 49ers, of course, being in a different situation where they were a Super Bowl contender. They went all the way to the NFC Championship game. So, of course, you want your Jimmy Garoppolo to go out there and be able to do what he was going to do. But when you're a team that's rebuilding, that doesn't have somebody, an established veteran, because when you have Andy Dalton as your, like, why are you afraid of upsetting Andy Dalton? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're a Dunkin' Donuts, and there's every once in a while, there's somebody who looks disheveled and homeless and is only purchasing black coffee. Do we really care if we're losing that person's business? Like, I don't know. Let's be a little bit more discerning. We were that upset about Andy Dalton, making sure his feelings weren't hurt last year. But regardless, Justin Fields is out there. I will tell you, I was keeping an eye on N'Keal Harry. I was interested to see that. I was interested to see, what he was able to do. I saw him getting some handoffs. And I know that anybody who is there would be like, oh my gosh, like that, our Debo. But then I'm like, what? Maybe it is. Maybe it could be our Debo. Like, we have a number of candidates who can go out there and do a number of different things. And by the way, I didn't get a chance to talk to Velus Jones Jr., which kind of broke my heart. But it's okay. He's busy. He's out there working. They had us working nonstop on the NFL Network. 3 interviews, which is incredible. We also had a couple of segments. I did a rookie segment. I did another segment too, where I was bantering with the guys who were talking about how, the Bears haven't done anything for Justin Fields. And you look at the defense and you look at the defensive secondary. Now, number one, you talk about the defensive secondary. Kyler Gordon looks as good as advertised. Jaquan Brisker, I was very impressed with. I thought he looked really good. Like, looks like a veteran out there. We saw Eddie Jackson being a little bit more active. I think that's what is going to be the key, is like, how much is Eddie Jackson going to buy into this? Because there's a 6th round rookie, Elijah Hicks, who could easily come in and at some point take over for Eddie Jackson if they needed to. But Eddie Jackson was out there running around looking pretty good. And so you're like, okay, like, I don't understand. And we have this conversation. It's one thing when I'm arguing with Joe Lyons fan on Twitter who is non-nuanced about, hey, like, they didn't do anything to help Fields out. And you're like, well, okay, like that person. I was debating with some of my NFL Network colleagues. Like I legitimately had to go back against Mike Girardi. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean they didn't give him help? Like they redid half their secondary. And if you have a team that's playing in short fields, that it's not having to drive 80 yards every time they touch the football, that's going to be impactful. I mean, look back at 2018. That was definitely a usage, a scheme. Like they were giving Mitch Trubisky short fields and an opportunity to score. That is a huge legitimate thing. And by the way, Travis Gibson, who, by the way, if you saw this on my Instagram story, I'm pretty confident that was Travis Gibson who was calling me out, who was waving hello to me on my Instagram story from yesterday. Go check it out. It might be too late. It might be gone now. But he looked amazing. And obviously, you talk about the offensive line, Riley Reif. Riley Reif was playing right tackle exclusively on Wednesday. And Braxton Jones was playing left tackle. They had Braxton at left tackle exclusively. He's out there mauling dudes. And Matt Eberflus said that he was going to give the starters ample opportunity to play in the preseason. There's 3 games. They got to go out and they got to play a little bit. So we'll see Braxton when he gets an opportunity against some live action, real pads. Reif Schofield on the right side. You're like, okay, that's an impressive offensive line. Travis Gibson was giving him some fits, like some absolute fits, dipping, diving around. And I thought it was impressive. We talk about him starting to play a more natural position. And as much as we liked Khalil Mack, and he's a name and he's a face, I think Travis Gibson, production-wise, is going to be better than Khalil Mack was last year. And I think he has a real opportunity to step into this team and really make something happen. And if Bobby Quinn, if he's ready to go as well, that's going to be huge. So, and of course, the only thing that's really hanging over, where there's obviously the injury to Lucas Patrick, and of course, Roquan Smith, who again was out there. He's out there. He's active. He's doing his hold in. Hopefully that situation, I think everybody's pretty confident that situation is going to rectify itself at some point, but he's out there. He's active. You just wonder who's advising the kid. Like, hopefully, like, hey, like, let's figure this out. Like, it's cool that you're out here and you're not going to be injured or anything like that. So I really do appreciate that from him. But at some point, you got to go in and you got to get settled and you got to get everything going. But I just did want to take an opportunity right now to thank the Chicago Bears for having me out. Now, obviously, I was sent out there for work for the NFL Network, but I do want to thank the Bears for their hospitality. Very welcoming, very accommodating. It was a good trip all the way around. So I cannot thank them enough. I'm really appreciative to be back home and to be out there with Bears training camp. We talked to Jalen Johnson, and of course, we talked to David Montgomery. You can find all that information on my Twitter account, on my Instagram. I've been posting videos. Although I do want to play one segment of David Montgomery when he was meeting with the media. Sam, if we can roll David Montgomery's sound when he talked about the Bears running back room. Do we got that, Sammy?
Yeah. We got a damn good running back room. Khalil being shifty, fast, got all the traits. Treston being very fast. He can get up out of there, and he's shifty too. Darrington, change of pace, can do a lot of everything too. Very good in pass protection, but also can make you miss. KB being a bruiser, big, strong guy, can lift you up. I'm telling you, can move you. Tug, he's small, but got a lot of heart, and he can move too. Very shifty as well. Who am I missing? Yourself. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm just me, man. I'm just me. I just go out there and be me, for real.
A humble superstar. And of course, you caught the interview on NFL Network. He was talking about how he has not felt like he has lived up to the legacy of some of the great Bears all-time running backs like Walter Payton and Gale Sayers. That's for debate. I think that he's been very good since 2020. He is 7th in the NFL with close to 2,000 rushing yards. So I thought right now this would be a pretty good time to debut a new part of the podcast, and we like to call it Fantasy Island.
Welcome to our Fantasy Island.
And the best way to kick off this segment is to go back into my past, to go back to one of my favorite people that I have ever worked with at the NFL Network. Of course, you remember him as the host of NFL Fantasy Live, and of course, the co-creator of the Danger Zone. Now you can see him killing it on DirecTV along with a number of other projects. Please welcome to the show, James Coe.
What's cracking? Danger Zone!
Oh man, it feels weird being the one to introduce you, but I am very pleased to have you on the show. I want to talk some Bears fantasy, of course, but since you're here, how are you doing? How is everything going?
Oh man, it's going great. Hey, listen, we're going to season number 5 with DirecTV, and look, you are the exception because you are an NFL media lifer. But for the rest of us, Joe Schmoes, us broadcast plebeians out there, working at a place for anything longer than 4 or 5 years is like an eternity. So this is literally the longest I have ever been at one place, and I love my group over there at DirecTV. And of course, you can catch all of our fantasy coverage on DirecTV channel 704 when the season starts rolling along. We're with you every single day. It's the red zone, but with the fantasy twist, man. Like, how do you beat it?
Oh, it's amazing, and we got John Henson does it, who's awesome. Lindsay, I was gonna say Lindsay Soto, but I know she's Lindsay Rhodes.
Wow, we're going.
I'm old school. I remember her when she was an Angels broadcaster.
Me too.
Even before she joined the NFL Network, and of course she is. Again, she's not there anymore either. But she's great, and you guys do a great job. And honestly, it's one of the ways that I love to watch football on a Sunday. Of course, I go into the green room at the NFL Network. I control 4 screens. I have the Bears game on one. I have one of the red zones muted. If I can get away with watching Andrews, I will usually do that. But of course, I've got the fantasy red zone on there because I want to see. I want to see what you guys are up to. We love the sketches that you do. The Bob Ross, probably my favorite. You guys, great production value. A lot of work goes into those. So I implore anybody, if you have DirecTV, make sure that you're getting the Fantasy Red Zone channel. It is well worth your time, and it's the stuff you want to know about. We're watching the Bears. But everybody's second favorite team is your fantasy team. So that's what I want to do. And a lot of people, we get these questions. So every Tuesday night, Carmen Batali and I, we do take it to the rank. And people ask fantasy, like, where are we drafting these guys in fantasy? And I have my very biased observations. And I would ask you, I will start off with the guy we just heard from, David Montgomery, who to me is probably the most enticing player of the Bears. Fantasy-wise, probably will have the highest average draft position. How do you feel as an outsider, as a guy who only loves fantasy, who has no allegiance to any NFL team? How do you feel about David Montgomery this season and the Bears? We'll go with David Montgomery.
Yeah, listen, it's tough, right? Because he is working behind an offensive line that is humbly probably one of the 5 worst in the NFL. It's an offense that on paper doesn't look great. Can Justin Fields take a step forward? And if he can keep that offense moving and trucking and just scoring points and keeping them competitive. Look, as we know in fantasy football, Adam, running backs are really they are such a byproduct of a system and score. Yeah. When teams are getting blown out, teams or running backs on bad teams don't tend to do well. So it makes me a little bit more worried about David Montgomery because, again, the season outlook for the Bears as we sit here today in early August doesn't look great.
According to you, I think it looks fantastic. I will say this, though. Recently, now, obviously, we talked about this earlier in the show. Braxton Jones played exclusively at left tackle on Tuesday and Wednesday. And when I was there on Wednesday, he was dominating people. They weren't rotating. Like, he's playing there exclusively. Riley Reif was playing right tackle. Of course, they also signed Michael Schofield. So it was kind of cool looking at one side of the offensive line, and you see like Schofield, you see Reif, and you're like, okay, those are solid veterans. They're not, they're not all. It's not the 90s Cowboys or anything like that, but still an improvement over what they had. I wonder though, when you look at the offense, and I think that for a lot of people, what we like to see is that there's going to be an offense designed for this quarterback, an offense that's going to probably be dedicated to running the football. I kind of see that. I kind of see it similar to what Philadelphia did last year, where they were one of the best run-heavy teams in the NFL. If the Bears can be competitive, if the Bears defense comes alive, and they spent 2 first-round picks on the defensive secondary, which is now starting to look like the strength of the team, couldn't you reason that the Bears might be competitive, and they're probably going to want to run to keep the games close?
Yeah, you would think they want to shorten the game up, right? Because again, I don't think they have the offensive personnel. And even I think the most ardent Chicago supporter would say, listen, they just don't have the pieces on the outside to get into a shootout. They just don't. Yeah. Look, we all love Darnell Mooney, and that's fine. But is he ready to take not just a small step forward, but he'd have to take a humongous step forward to kind of sort of keep their air attack alive, because the depth behind him, man, it's not looking great, So,
right.
So yeah, you're right. I think they would be smart. The smart play is certainly to shorten the game up and to just kind of sort of stay within striking distance. I think that makes a lot of sense. The offensive coordinator there, Luke Getsy, is a former quarterback himself. They've got, that Green Bay roots there too. So how much do they want to open it up, and how conservative do they want to be? I'm really curious to see, especially with Eberflus having that defensive background. I mean, Adam, man, like defensive coordinators that take these jobs, they also tend to want to run that ball.
Yeah.
So defense and the running game, it's like hot sauce and fried chicken, man. It just goes, Yeah. So I think David Montgomery's certainly going to get a lot of work. I love the fact that he's talking about the depth in that running back room, because I agree. I think they, especially with Khalil Herbert and David Montgomery, potentially give me a nice little 1-2 combination. They'll stay fresh as the season wears on.
Do you think, and this again would be the most optimistic of a Bears take, which is what this show is all about. You look at what happened last year with the Green Bay Packers, A.J. Dillon, Aaron Jones, both those guys topped 1,100 scrimmage yards. I think that the Bears, again, because there's not a lot of guys there, that it's going to be dependent on David Montgomery and to some extent Khalil Herbert getting into the mix. And I also do believe David Montgomery is going to have to catch the football. I saw him split out wide on Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday morning, and you're like, all right, they went empty backfield. They had David Montgomery out there running routes. I think that, putting him, as a receiver out of the backfield, I think because there is a lack of options, David Montgomery, I think, is probably going to outperform his average draft position.
It's an interesting one, because again, this is a guy that had averaged 3.8 yards per carry last year in terms of David Montgomery, and Khalil Herbert was slightly better. I think he was like 4.2 yards per carry, right? So, but again, I don't know if that is necessarily David Montgomery's fault so much as bad coaching. Offensive line play was certainly not up to snuff. I agree with you. I think with the Reif addition, I think with Braxton Jones, to me, it feels like they're moving at least in the right direction from the offensive line standpoint. And man, look, what you can never count in terms of looking at a team on paper or on the stat sheet? It's just heart and determination, And for me, the Chicago Bears last year completely gave up on their coaching staff, and maybe the coaching staff kind of sort of gave up on themselves too. Yeah. And it's really hard to put a value on that. This is a new coaching staff. You've got a breath of fresh air. It just feels like going into 2022, it's just a completely different atmosphere. You know what I mean? There's a certain pep, I think, in the step of the Chicago Bears. So that, I think, goes a long way. So we'll see if it translates into competitive football on the football field.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I thought was most noticeable, was the players talking about accountability, watching the pace in practice and talking to some of the people who covered the team last year. I don't want to call anybody out, but I was talking to, a couple of the locals, and they were like, yeah, like it was crazy. Like last year, like players would show up late for stuff. There was guys like, there wasn't as much attention to detail. I will tell you that we had Jalen Johnson for a live hit on NFL Network, and he came in and he's like, I cannot miss my 2:00 meeting. Like, no matter what is happening, I got to get out of here, live TV or not, I got to go. And so I think that that's starting to permeate the building. And, we're all recklessly speculating what is going on with Tevin Jenkins. A lot of people, again, nobody really has a clear idea of what's going on. And I even, we talked to Matt Eberflus off the air about Tevin Jenkins, and you could tell like he doesn't want to talk about it. The information out there is the information out there. The working theory, and it's probably reckless to do this, but the working theory is like, hey, people who do not love football are not going to make the Chicago Bears. So if he really, like, if there's something behind the scenes, that could be part of it. So I think that the effort, I look at the zone blocking scheme, which of course is coming in from the Kyle Shanahan or the Mike Shanahan coaching tree, that all kind of permeates down. And you're looking at David Montgomery. And again, and I'm taking a little bit of a leap of faith that the team is going to be better than a lot of people are anticipating. And you're like, okay, I'm more bullish on David Montgomery. I might outdraft or draft him a round or two earlier than most people, or not too early, but still. But I guess my question to you would be, if you were, and not that you're out on David Montgomery, I think that every player has a price, and it's how comfortable you are. Does that bode well, though, for, let's say, Darnell Mooney? Because if the Bears are playing in a lot of games where you're anticipating a deficit and they're going to have to throw to get back into the ball game, Darnell Mooney, who had, 140 targets last year, could probably see an increase in that total this year. How bullish are you on Darnell Mooney?
Yeah, I think Mooney's a great player too. Did not have a great catch rate last year at just 57%. But I mean, again, quarterback play was not that strong. Offensive line play was certainly lacking. And I just felt like the quarterbacks, man, they were never comfortable. Not in that system. Again, the coaching staff was certainly to blame there too. And it was crazy last year, man, in Chicago. Like, you look at the coaching decisions and you're thinking like, these guys absolutely did not put their players in a place to succeed, Yeah. So you would hope that this coaching staff is going to be a little bit different. I mean, it goes all the way back to the preseason where they weren't even giving Justin Fields reps with the ones. That doesn't make sense,
No,
at some point that this guy's going to get in there. You got to have him build some chemistry with Mooney and Allen Robinson. It just doesn't make any sense, So anyways, back to Mooney. You're right. 140 targets last year. Not a great, catch rate, but I think overall there's a lot to like. He's smooth with it. I like watching him play football. And if he can get a little bit more, experience, I mean, he's going to his age 25 season. So right now you feel like, okay, this is a time when players really start to enter into their prime. So you're right, man. If they're going to be playing from behind, there's certainly a lot to like about Mooney. There's going to be some catch-up games. Look, at the end of the day, Adam, it's like, can he score touchdowns? Because I think the yardage will be there, and I think the receptions will be there. For him to break through his current ADP, he's going to have to score touchdowns. Last year he had 4. This is one of the lowest scoring offenses in the NFL last year. So can this team take a step forward? And can Fields and Mooney take a step forward? If they can, and we're talking about a guy that gets 8 touchdowns. Yeah, man, he's gonna definitely bust through that ADP for sure.
Yeah, I've been looking at him. It's funny because I have been drafting in a lot of mock drafts that I do, Allen Robinson, and then turning around in the next round and getting Darnell Mooney, so I can reunite them again, at least on my fantasy team. I know he plays for the Rams. What is your outlook for Allen Robinson this year? Because I'm in the camp that he's going to dominate. And listen, and I try to tell everybody who's a Bears fan, like, last year was not his fault. Let's put that on Matt Nagy. I think going and playing with Sean McVay, and I don't care if they bring him back Odell Beckham Jr. or anything. And if they do, OBJ is not coming back to like week 14 or something.
Right.
I love Allen Robinson this year, and I feel like I'm going to have to start overdrafting him. How do you feel about Allen Robinson?
I love Allen Robinson. I think he's going to go crazy, dude. We're talking, and also think about not just Odell, but like Van Jefferson right now having a second procedure on that surgically repaired knee. Like that is a big time moment. If you're a Van Jefferson fan, but certainly it opens up a huge opportunity, I think, for Allen Robinson. Look, they get rid of Bobby Trees, and it's basically the Cooper Kupp show with Allen Robinson on the outside. Cooper Kupp dominating inside, Allen Robinson working the outside. Matt Stafford, as we know, loves to take shots downfield. Allen Robinson, not necessarily a speedster, but will get opportunities, air yards, and volume in terms of targets and air yards downfield. He's going to have a lot of high leverage targets, which again, in fantasy, you love. He's going to see targets in the red zone. They love throwing it in the red zone as well. So yeah, man, I am all in on Allen Robinson. If you are basing, what you kind of saw last year and thinking, okay, well, and I get it. How many times have we seen, players who are of this age? Again, he's going to be 29 next year. How many times have we seen players get around that age and kind of have a little bit of a drop off and then a huge drop off? But I just feel like that's not what we saw with Allen Robinson last year. He was banged up. He certainly did not look motivated whatsoever, and he just didn't have a quarterback that could throw accurately or on time. And to me, man, Allen Robinson is poised for an absolutely huge bounce back year. I love Allen Robinson, especially at the ADP. Oh my gosh, dude. He's going crazy late. He's going like in the 70s right now. Like what an absolute bargain he is.
Oh, I agree with you. And once again, we're joined by James Coe of DirecTV. Make sure you check out the Fantasy Red Zone this season as you're watching Allen Robinson score all those touchdowns. You're like, oh, I'm so glad I listened to those guys during the summer who were telling me that Allen Robinson was going to bounce back. I want to talk about Cole Kmet, though. You talk about guys who scored touchdowns. Cole Kmet didn't. And I look at a team like the Bears, who last season, they were 13th in the NFL in 12 personnel. Luke Getsy comes over. The Packers last year were second in the NFL in 12 personnel. Is it possible that Cole Kmet breaks out this year?
Absolutely. There's actually a lot to like, I think, with Cole Kmet. We're talking about a 23-year-old tight end. So, now that he's got a little bit of playing experience, traditionally tight ends have taken a little bit longer to develop in the NFL. And I think Cole Kmet certainly fits that profile. What's crazy, man? Like the guy saw 93 targets last year.
Yeah.
It feel like it, but that's a good number for a guy who is, again, who's going to be drafted outside, most likely outside the top 10 fantasy tight ends. And you're getting a bargain basement prices. Oh my gosh. Yes. I love Cole Kmet going into 2022. And again, what's crazy too? It's like the guy had like a 65% catch rate. I love talking about catch rate because it just speaks to efficiency. Can this guy get back to about league average in terms of efficiency catching the football? I think he can. Right? Tight ends generally get, layup throws. So that 65% catch rate, pretty low for a tight end. So for me, I just feel like, overall, let's get this guy back up to 70, 75% catch rate. You show him about 100 targets in this upcoming offense. Guys, that's a lot to like. We're talking, maybe 70 receptions next year, maybe 700 yards, something like that. And you throw in 4 or 5 touchdowns. Yeah, it doesn't sound like a ton, but Adam, as you know, tight end is generally a wasteland. If you can kind of sort of get that, you're talking about potentially, cracking the top 12, list in terms of tight ends with spike weeks every now and again.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if you miss out on guys like Kyle Pitts or Mark Andrews early in your draft, and you're drafting, I don't know, Mike Gesicki or somebody like that, who's a little bit further down the board, to me, when you come back to rounds 14, 15, nobody's drafting Cole Kmet. I take a flyer on him. You never know. Again, you look at this offense last year, Jesper Horsted, Zach Miller, these guys were scoring touchdowns. Cole Kmet somehow was shut out of the end zone. I feel like that's a blip. And again, going back to Getsy and playing, what he was able to do with that Packers offense, and I know a lot of it was Aaron Rodgers. I think that we could probably all now realize that perhaps Cole Kmet's not going to be the George Kittle of the Chicago Bears. But if he's the Robert Tonyan of the Chicago Bears, listen, Bob Tonyan 2 years ago, give me all the Bob Tonyan. Give me 10 touchdowns. I'm completely fine with it. I do want to ask though, we love quarterbacks. We love quarterbacks who run the football. Justin Fields was still what? A top 5? Like he played like 6 games, it felt like. He was still like top 5 for rushing yards for quarterbacks. The upside's always there. And listen, let's not get into a philosophical debate on quarterback scoring. But given standard scoring operations, it feels foolish to me to not at least take a dart throw on Justin Fields. You don't have to draft him as your starter. That's fine. But the running ability alone just leads me to be drafted or taking a chance on him. It just seems ridiculous not to.
We know about the speed. We know about his get out ability. And I just feel like he's got at least the upside to certainly take one to the cribbo at any opportunity. When you're talking about a Chicago Bears offense, Adam, that again, outside of Mooney and Kmet, who are we throwing the football to? There's going to be some checkdowns, I think, to the running back position, certainly. But generally, we know mobile quarterbacks don't tend to check it down, really. So Justin Fields, what kind of commitment is he going to have to running the football? Last year, I felt like he didn't quite know what he wanted to do, right? And again, that goes back to the coaching staff. Did he want to be a pocket passer? Did he want to just make plays? Because when young quarterbacks who have the ability to run the football, they can't make that early read, they just get out. That wasn't Justin Fields for some reason, which was confusing to me, right? Like he didn't have his first read. He didn't have his second read. Okay, now just run. But no, that's not what he did. He hung around in the pocket and far too often took negative yardage when I just felt like, oh my gosh, you're a young guy. You've got the legs, man. Just get out there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So there was a lot of opportunities for him to get out. And yet he didn't. And yet still had over 400 rushing yards. And to me, that is very intriguing. So to your point, this is a guy that could absolutely rack up 500, 600 rushing yards given a full workload this season. I kind of sort of agree with you. We love rushing quarterbacks in fantasy football. I think Justin Fields is a very solid sleeper quarterback.
Yeah, it's unfair. And again, it goes back to the way fantasy football rewards rushing quarterbacks. It doesn't seem fair. I know that you love doing 6 points for passing touchdowns.
Got to.
-4 for interceptions. That way you cannot, you can't, just take one of these quarterbacks who's throwing a ton of picks. The Jameis 30-30 year was something to behold.
We really called it the Blake Bortles rule. It's like Blake Bortles was an awful real life quarterback. I mean, just abysmal, and yet was a fantasy football. He was still a top 10 quarterback in fantasy. That my brain hurts. Like that can't happen. That can't happen. So when you go 6'4", that kind of sort of equals itself out, where you get a lot more like damaging games from Blake Bortles and the Jameis Winstons of the world than you do good games. And I feel like that is a little bit more in line with the real game.
No, I agree with you. You want to make it. I know everybody always asks me too. They're like, what do we do? Like, what is the workaround to kind of make it more fair, reward the good quarterbacks? I think number one, 6'4" is a great way to do that. Super flex also makes that very important. I had a question on Twitter the other day. Somebody was asking me about Josh Allen. Like, should I keep Devontae Adams or Josh Allen? And, I'm like, well, what is the league setup? Like if it's super flex, you keep Josh Allen. If it's not, you would go with Devontae Adams. And that just shows you that it's wrong. And speaking of Devontae Adams, let me ask you real quick before I let you go. Yes, Aaron Rodgers is fantasy-wise, just as a fantasy query. Do you think he takes a hit this year without Devontae Adams, or do you think like it's going to be no big deal? He's going to turn Romeo Doubs into a fantasy superstar.
I know Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs. It's like, who is this guy thrown to right now?
And they talk about Justin Fields and his lack of weapons. They got broken down Sammy Watkins, like Alan Lazard, who wants to be Alan Lazard talking about like, I want to be one of the best receivers in the NFL. You're like, settle down, sir.
Oh my God. Not only that, but it's like, okay, what's up with David Bakhtiari, man? Like, is he good to go? Do we know if he's good to go?
Sound like it.
Lot of questions in regards to that offensive line too. We think Elton Jenkins will be healthy. Pretty sure he will be, but we're not sure. Coming off of an ACL tear, I believe. So, man, imagine if Bakhtiari and Jenkins are not around. We're talking about your like 2 Pro Bowl tackles. I don't know. I think we kind of saw that. Didn't we see this? I felt like we saw this story like 5 years ago where it was Mike McCarthy's last stand. Their offensive line was in tatters and Aaron Rodgers was just running around, in a panic, man. Like, again, great quarterback, but it's like, you can only do so much, right? You know what, man? It's so interesting you bring this up. I wrote a note to myself, like low key, I feel like Aaron Rodgers is a huge bust candidate.
No, love it.
Like a huge bust candidate, like low key, like I'm not sure if I'm ready to like unveil that hot take. You know what I'm saying? But maybe.
I don't know. Be ready. Maybe we'll tweet it out for you. James Coe.
Yeah.
We won't do that. Sammy's already making up the Instagram post. Sammy, stop. Don't hang James out to dry like that. But it is.
I don't know if I'm ready. I might be. I'm close. I'm close to ready. But here's the thing. Aaron Rodgers, he's no spring chicken.
No.
Dude's going to be what, 39 years old this upcoming season, bro? Like, okay. We're getting to like drop off age right here, aren't we? I mean, look, there can't be that many Tom Brady's in this world, bruh. Like I know Aaron Rodgers has looked freaking phenomenal the last 2 years, but you take away his safety blanket, you take away one of the best weapons in the game in Devontae Adams. And again, I'm just saying, maybe Bakhtiari and or Jenkins is not around. Okay. I know Green Bay's doing an awesome job drafting O-linemen, but I don't know. Something could happen there. The O-line could be worse. Aaron Rodgers could be worse. The receiving core is definitely worse. I've never been a Lafleur fan either. No, listen, I am on an island here, but I don't feel like Lafleur's a good coach, man.
Does he not give you like sort of like Adam Gase vibes? Of like,
oh my gosh, 100%.
Like, how much of a genius are you really if you're just orchestrating Aaron Rodgers? Like, it's not like you resurrected the career of like one of these other quarterbacks, like some middling quarterback. Like Andy Dalton. Like if Andy Dalton had the best years of his career with you, then perhaps. But it's like it's Aaron Rodgers. Like, what did you do?
I don't know. Like, I agree with you. It's like, okay, Aaron Rodgers is in firm control of the offense. And meanwhile, I feel like he's kind of sort of like overcoming this whole boomer offense that they've got in Green Bay. Like, they want to run the ball with 2 backs like all the time. Like, I'm just confused, In Tennessee, was he good? Do we know if he was? I don't think he was good in Tennessee.
Well, you know what he did? He was like, he goes, we should run the ball with Derrick Henry. He was the one who finally figured it, or was it Arthur Smith?
That was Arthur Smith. That was Arthur Smith. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't. Yeah, you're right. It's like he wasn't like the guy that unleashed Derrick Henry. That's not what he did.
No, not at all. And he was, he just was from that Sean McVay coaching tree. Like I think there's a lot of like with Matt LaFleur, and I don't want to upset my friends in Cincinnati because I had a good time there last weekend. But Zach Taylor all of a sudden became a good coach once Joe Burrow showed up and started dominating.
Dude, let me just I had to pull this up, man. But like Matt LaFleur, his last year as an OC in Tennessee, decided that it was a good idea to give old ass Dion Lewis 155 carries in that offense. Bruh. I mean, come on, bruh. What is it? Dion Lewis is getting 155 carries. Derrick Henry was getting 215. That was, like a 60-40 split between Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis, bro. Like, what? Is that good coaching? I don't feel like that's good coaching.
No. I feel like Matt Lafleur and his well-manicured eyebrows are one of the biggest, not a fraud, but I don't know. And by the way, I'm convinced that that Packers coaching staff did not like me. I saw them at the NFL Honors, and it was whoever their general manager is, Budacris or whomever, and Lafleur and some other guy, Mark Murphy. Like they
some other guy.
I don't know. They're all wearing their Green Bay stuff.
Team presidents of one of the 32 NFL clubs.
Whatever.
Yes.
Listen,
some guy, Mark Murphy.
Is that him? I don't know. Like,
I don't know. I'm just saying, did you see Murphy or not? Like, that's so great.
I don't know.
It's so great that you just see some NFL executive and you're like, yeah, some schmuck in a suit was there. And he didn't like me.
I would not have recognized any one of them unless they had the Packers lapel pin.
Oh my God, that is fantastic.
LaFleur's like well-manicured eyebrows. Because one of the guys, one of the Packers players did come up and start talking to me and start talking about how I was talking to James Jones. So, but like, he was like, hey, we know who you are. I'm like, oh no. Like, they're jokes, sir.
Oh boy.
Well, and I don't know if you listened to me earlier in the show, but David Montgomery, when I met with David Montgomery on Wednesday, he was like, hey, he's like, I was looking forward to talking to you. And I'm like, wow. I'm sorry. Like, who do you think I am? He's like, oh, we know who you are. He's like, we know. He's like, they all admitted, Jalen Johnson and David Montgomery, all those guys are like, oh, we listen. We know what's going on with the media.
Oh my gosh.
We know who's saying what. Which is cool. And you're like, oh my gosh. And the Bears are really excited about this. And you're like, oh my God, the Packers have to hate me. This is why I don't get sent to Green Bay.
Yes.
Which is fine. Like, keep me out of Wisconsin. Like, I don't care. Like, oh, I'm being punished by not going to Wisconsin.
Look at you.
I don't like too when they show like they do the NFL Network animation and they show the pin of where Lake Forest is in comparison to Chicago. And where it is in comparison to the state of Wisconsin. It's like, yeah, I'm a little too close to Wisconsin. I'm not digging this as much because it's it's not gosh. Wisconsin has some beautiful parts. Green Bay not being one of them.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So yeah, man, I don't know, man. I'm ready to. I don't know if I'm 100% ready to unleash the hot take of Aaron Rodgers going to fall off. But bro,
you don't want to Kellerman. Don't Kellerman yourself.
I know that. I think about that all the time, man.
Is that a good thing? Do you want to be? Because like Kellerman doesn't care.
I think about Kellerman, how he just wrote off Brady like 8 years ago or whatever. It's crazy. But man, tell me that the ingredients are not at least there, for an Aaron Rodgers fall off.
Oh my God.
It's at least there.
It's there. Like we had we talked to people who are not Bears fans, and they're a lot of people are dismissive of the Bears receiving core, which is fine. There's a lot of unprovens, there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of faith being put into it, but it's like, you cannot tell me that it's worse than the Packers, because the Packers, and I love Romeo Doubs. Like, don't get me wrong, but it's like, that's what you're counting on. You're counting on your 5th round pick or whatever round he went in. I don't know that.
Well, I mean, Christian Watson was an earlier round pick for them.
But he hasn't been practicing.
I know. He has not showed well in camp yet. No, I agree.
A lot of time,
yes, he has. But the athletic profile, I'm staying on brand here, Rank. You know me. The athletic profile for Christian Watson, I mean, that is interesting, man.
Do you want to plug reception perception here? Is that what you're doing?
Well, I just want to bring up his athletic profile before I dive into the whole RP profile. But man, like 6'4", 210, he ran a 4.36 40 with a 38.5-inch vertical. Again, at 6'4".
Yeah.
I mean, bro, that is enticing. That I just would be salivating, thinking about if Christian Watson can develop just a little bit. And remember, it took Devontae Adams a couple seasons to develop too, but the Packers don't got that kind of time, bro. Like they need Christian Watson to do things pretty much from the word go. I almost hope that they use him kind of like rookie Martavis Bryant, where they're just like, hey, young guy, you got the legs. Go ahead and clear out deep. And we're just going to feed Allen Lazard. And if they start sleeping on you over the top, I'm just going to hit you over the top. Maybe you catch 8 to 10 touchdowns on like 60 receptions. You know what I'm saying? Like that would be, I think, the ideal move for Christian Watson. Look, I know we're talking fantasy, but in fantasy, I'm not interested in Christian Watson, especially not after, they're probably going to work in, Watkins. They're probably going to work in this Romeo Doubs character. And we'll see what happens. But boy, from a real life perspective, I'm so intrigued, man. Like he can absolutely be that like go-getter over the top because again, 6'4", 4.3, 640. That is rare size speed combination, man.
Yeah, you don't see that a lot in the NFL, and that's one of the reasons why he was so highly regarded coming out of college. And one of the reasons why you're so highly regarded is that you do a great job of breaking down the NFL, especially from a fantasy perspective. DirecTV, Fantasy Red Zone this fall. Where else can people find you, James?
Well, let's see. Hopefully we run it back at Fan Controlled Football. And there might be some other fan controlled announcements. I don't know. We'll see. But of course my written work will be found on receptionperception.com. And I got some other things, I don't know, percolating. I can't share it quite yet, but we are working on some things in the background that could be kind of exciting too. So maybe if those things do unfold, you'll be kind enough to have me back, man.
Oh, we would love that. So you have an open invitation anytime you want to sit here and take a break on Fantasy Island. Invitation at any point. I want to thank you. Great seeing you. Sorry that I missed your birthday last week, but I was coming back. Like I couldn't be like come back from Cincinnati and then be like, hey, I'm gonna go on a pub crawl.
Boozing it up, yeah.
You know how it goes. But I appreciate you being here, and we will definitely have you on in the future. Be well, and we'll see you soon.
Rank, it's always great catching up, man. Good luck to you this upcoming season. And man, you are just absolutely freaking crushing it on this podcast, bro.
You're far too kind. We're having a good time, but we thank you. And there he goes, the great James Coe. Want to thank him. We were sitting here. We didn't, Fantasy Island. We took a lot of time, but I thought it was very fun to get into, taking some shots at the Packers, having a good time otherwise. Want to thank him for coming on, and we want to thank you for joining us here, and for everybody who's listening on WCKG AM 1530. Thank you for making us the Chicago home of the Sick Podcast. Well, a quick reminder, we'll be back Tuesday night. Carmen Vitale and I will be back for another edition of Take It to the Rank, 8 p.m. Eastern. Until that time, bear down, and Sammy, why don't you go ahead and play us out?
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.